All right, happy Friday, everybody. This is Jason Bickle with Calidus Cloud, and today we're talking about interactive animations for mobile learning, the 1, 2, 3 of Sencha Animator, and we'll talk about why that's important in just a moment. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded, and this slide deck will be made available to you from that standpoint, although I will say that most of today's webinar will be in Sencha Animator, so the deck is fairly light from that standpoint. So we'll let you into that. But let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Jason Bickle with Calidus Cloud. Rapid Intake is a part of the Calidus Cloud Learning set, and I'm the Director of Community Events there. And I've been doing e-learning and mobile learning, 15 years of e-learning, multimedia classroom training and development, graphics, flash animation, audio, etc. classroom. I've also been an Associate Professor of Computer Graphics and Communication Studies, and really in the last 4 or 5 years, e-platform learning strategist. And what does that mean? It means building learning on multiple platforms, including classroom, instructor-led, webinar, e-learning, mobile learning, etc. How do you put all that together to make sense of things? And finally, what I always tell folks is that I'm working to build a stronger development community. Why bang your head against the monitor when I already have the lumps? So if you'd like to work with me, I am available to that end as part of the Calidus Cloud Learning Group, and we can discuss that if you have needs from that standpoint. So what does our agenda look like today? First and foremost, we're going to talk about what is Sencha Animator, and we're going to get right into animation things, but we're going to talk about some structure there first. We're going to understand the animation package and what does that look like. Many of you, if you've been in e-learning and mobile learning or e-learning for a long time, you know that the way that we did animation was Flash in some way, somehow. So either you had a tool that created an SWF or you did it in Flash directly. And so we're going to talk about what that package looks like. We're also going to talk about the basics of animation, graphics for Sencha Animator, interactivity, and then also loading that into a mobile course so you get an idea what that looks like as well. So it's quite a jam-packed full hour that we have, but hopefully this will get you started in Sencha and start thinking about whether it's a good tool for you to use. And when we load that into a mobile course, you'll see how that can work in the Rapid Intake software as well. So as we move forward here, let's go ahead and let's take a look. Well, before we do that, before I ask this question, let me run a poll here real quick. So just want to see who's in the room a bit. So let's run this poll so I can see who we're talking to. So your Flash animation, have you ever animated in Flash before? We're just about done on the voting there. Sorry about that. You can't answer here. You're on your iPad. I'm not sure why that is. I'd have to look at it. But thanks for letting me know. Let's see. All right. It looks like those who have voted wanted to. Let's see what the results are. So it looks like for today's presentation, we've got almost 50% of you have done some animations. Some have almost 35% have done nothing, and I've got just a few of you, 18%, that have your Flash animation expert. So we got a good mix of folks. So I'll spend a little bit of time on basic animation structures, but even those of you that have been in Flash and animated there, Sencha's structure is a bit different, and so we'll talk about that as well. So thank you for letting me know that information. I appreciate it. All right, so first and foremost, what you need to understand about Sencha Animator, and some of you may already know this, is that with Flash Player, if you look on the object there on the left-hand side, representing a mobile device, if you will, we have the HTML and CSS shell, or this is the browser on that side. So we have the HTML and CSS shell. That would be your course that you normally would launch on your desktop, and then that would launch, that HTML, CSS would launch a Flash player with an SWF. The nice thing about Flash, what made it great, is that it was a rich multimedia platform with one file. And sometimes there's more than one, but it was one file, self-contained animation with synced audio, video, etc. One file. Now, you may have linked video in that SWF from that standpoint, but it was basically one file. So it was very easy to manage the interface with the Flash file. Well, now with HTML5 and CSS on the mobile side, we have HTML5 CSS shell, and that's navigation. That's a website, okay? And then we have the HTML5 CSS package, which will come out of Sencha, which is another website. So in essence, what we have is a website playing within a website. Those of you that are familiar with web design, this is a very common thing that we do. For those of you that are fairly new to web structures and sort of picking it up on the mobile side, you know, basically we're loading a whole HTML package into the frame that's going to be inside the mobile course. Now, what's interesting about this is because it's not one file, okay, it's easy enough to write one page, but what's nice, one of the things that we've done is we've now enabled you to upload the entire package to the Rapid Intake Authoring System. And when you're looking at that, you know, and you're looking at tools, look for that, upload that entire package to that system. That way your entire HTML package will run. And it's a website within a website that will include multiple files, index HTML, images, JavaScript, CSS, all those things are loaded there, okay? So that's the difference between the two. Flash was basically one file, majority of the time, and where HTML, where Sencha Animator comes in now, is multiple files that come in, okay? The other thing is that we're using actually the browser Canvas to animate versus the Flash platform, okay? And Canvas, just a quick mention of that, that gives us the ability in HTML5 to actually draw and animate within the browser window, okay, whether it be desktop or mobile. Okay. Yeah, and Becky makes a comment. She says the single file is at least what we've lost. Let me see what the question is. She says the real issue is that when you develop HTML5, what you see in testing is not necessarily what you get on all the browsers. Yes, and that's actually a discussion I have quite a bit, is that one of the things that made e-learning possible is that we had standard browser capabilities. We had a rich media platform, Flash, that met all those browser needs, and we had standards for all of that stuff. And now on the mobile side, we don't, and those things are all coming and being developed and being worked on. So it is difficult to develop in the mobile browser. I didn't want to spend too much time on that discussion, but yes, Becky, you're right in that we have to be careful, and you guys are going to find that developing on the mobile side, especially with animation things, that there's a lot of trial and error, and depending on the size of device you're trying to hit, whether it's a phone or a tablet, you've got to bring in compensation for that. So we'll move on from that standpoint, but thanks, Becky, for the note. 182. All right, so let's keep moving on here. So real quickly, for those of you that are not animators by trade, just here's a quick screen on this. Basically in animation we have what we call our keyframes. This is very important to Flash, but it's also very important to Sencha Animator. It's the same construct. And a keyframe is basically where something starts, stops, or changes in any way. Okay, so if something starts to move or stops to move, or changes color, changes shape, changes dimension, it's a keyframe. Think of Mickey's hand down at the bottom, Mickey Mouse, and he moves his hand above his head. Well, the first keyframe would be his hand at the bottom of the screen, and the second keyframe would be the hand at the top of the screen. Okay, those are the keyframes. And then the animation tools, Flash and Sencha Animator alike, actually do what we call in the middle, called a tween. Okay, and that tween means in between, and it animates all the frames in between. So in order for an animation to occur, you must have at least two keyframes. You may have more than one, more than two, but you must have at least two. All right. The other thing is the shorter distance between the keyframes, the faster the animation. The longer the distance, the slower the animation. And so when we think of frames and time, the more time it takes for an animation to go across, then the slower the animation. Okay, or the more frames, if you will. Although Sencha doesn't generally use frames, so that's why I'm staying away from that from you Flash people. All right, so the more time, the slower the animation, the less time, the closer they are together, the faster the animation goes from that standpoint. So that's the basic nuts and bolts of animation. You must have two keyframes. Something starts, something stops, something changes, and another keyframe that something starts, something stops, or something changes on the other side, and that will make sense in just a moment there. Are there any questions before I get started in Sencha this morning? And for some of you, it's afternoon. How does Sencha Animator compare to Adobe Edge? I've played with Adobe Edge a little bit, to be perfectly honest with you, but on purpose I stuck to, because I'm doing some presentations and things, I stuck to Sencha Animator. One of my cohorts took on Adobe Edge, and we're playing with both of them. I find it easier to animate because it's actually more like the animation that I've taught for years. I taught Flash for 10 years at the college level, and so I find Sencha easier to use. However, I haven't touched Edge in a little while, so it's a good question. But I would definitely play with both of them and see what you think from that standpoint. So I'm going to get caught up on Edge as well, but I do like Sencha Animator. It is pretty straightforward, and it's easy for me to animate it. Does it incorporate audio? That's actually a big question when it comes to Sencha Animator, and I'm actually going to switch my screen now as we talk about this. So we're actually going to be in the Sencha Animator screen now. It does incorporate audio. Here's the thing about audio is now we don't have a single file that stores animation and audio. It's a browser structure, and we have audio, and we have images, and we have video. And yes, the mobile browser can play audio. However, Sencha doesn't incorporate that because it's not part of the standard animation structure. You can still link it. You can still build the page to play audio if you chose to do so, but you're using the HTML5 structure to play the audio. You're using the audio tag to play the audio at that point. Now, the cool thing about Sencha Animator, let me tag back to that. Let's say you use Sencha Animator to create this wonderful animation that you built, and you want it to run on all these devices. It gives you the page. It gives you the HTML page. It gives you all the code. If you want to go back in and code in audio to play, you can do that. They're still going to have to click the play button on the audio. But that's the other part that we lost with Flash Player is the fact that if you want synced audio and animation at the same time, you can either convert it to video, okay, so Flash to video, or you can make the user click play and play the audio there. But that's one of the things you have to balance between the two. All right, so let's talk about animation here, and let's just kind of go through the interface. I've got lots of folks that have created some animation in Flash and lots of folks who haven't, so let's walk through the interface. So over on the left-hand side, we basically have the objects that we can put in. We have square, circle, text, images that I've created. We also have the ability to put in video, okay? And again, this is a website structure, so everything is linked. This is not one file. All we're doing is building a website in basic structure. But Sencha is helping us do that. And the last thing is HTML. And what this does is actually allows you, it creates an iframe to put more HTML into. So it's just another container for HTML from that standpoint. If you're going to do one thing on the mobile side, if you've been developing e-learning for a long time or just a short time and you're going mobile, if you want to get better at mobile, you're going to have to learn a little bit more HTML and the capabilities there, because the tools don't exist the same way that they have for such a long time that helped us so much. And the more that you know about HTML and how it's structured, the more you'll be able to do even with Sencha Animator or Edge, because you can extend those things more and more. Okay. So let's just create a basic animation. So we're going to do the red ball, and I've always done the red ball. All the years I taught animation, I always started with the red ball. So everybody does. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to click the ball, and I'm going to draw my circle. Okay. If I hold my shift, I get that. Okay, so I've got my new circle. Now, some of you that have animated before, this little dot right here is going to look like a keyframe, but it's really not. It's just telling me there's something in the layer itself. I can label my layers, okay, that I have here. And basically, guys, for those of you that have not animated before, what this looks like is that I have simple animations, but if I layer a bunch of them, then they look complex. Okay. And I'm going to show you some good examples here in just a few minutes once we get through with this first demonstration. So I've got my ball here, okay, and if I double click, I actually get to the attributes of the ball itself. Okay, and that means I get the pink squares and circles, and that means I'm actually talking to the object of the ball itself. Okay, and notice I gave it a name, and I can close this panel over here, and then I can begin to do some other things. For example, if I go to the background, I can actually set the color to whatever I choose. Okay, and I can even turn off the border down here on the side as well. Okay. So now I've just got the red ball. But if I want to add a little bit, because we are using CSS here, what's nice is I can come in, make sure I get my pink square around it. I can actually come in and put in a gradient, and I can say, well, I want it to be red, and I did a radial gradient, which is this button over here to the side. And then I can actually say, okay, what's the direction? Where's my, if I open the gradient panel, okay, and this will take some play from that standpoint, but I can drag this up and notice that I'm shifting where the reflection is of the light, okay, the light source. So, and I can increase the red a little bit by dragging this over. So now I've got a nice three-dimensional ball, okay, and this is really more about learning how to draw than it is about the tool itself, but you can do that inside of the background colors inside of the gradient tool, okay. And just for you really tech people out there, what it's actually doing is when I draw a ball, it's drawing a div tag, and then it's using CSS to actually draw the structure that we have here. Okay. I can rotate this ball. I can stretch the size. I can rotate. I have undo, so I can bring the ball back to where I wanted it to be. And so now I've created the ball itself. Okay. So in order to create a keyframe, let's make this animate now. You note that I said you must have more than one keyframe. Well, I'm going to start with one. Okay. Now, notice that the timeline up at the top of the frame is the timeline is how much time is passing, where is the animation actually occurring. So here are our objects over on the left. Here's our stage. And then over here in the middle, we have our timeline, or at the top, we have our timeline, and it's actually in seconds. Okay. And notice that for those of you who have done Flash before, there are no frames here. It's by time. So, and I can zoom in and zoom out on that, okay? But what I've noticed is that what I like to do is I'll put in a keyframe, and if I want this literally to start at 0, 0, I make sure to put in 0, 0 in the time, okay? So I know exactly where that keyframe begins. And when I used to do video production and editing many years ago, we did a lot of things by time code, and a lot of animation tools still do that. And so pay attention to your time code and where things actually are. And it gives me actually approximately some time at the beginning, and I'm at the earliest point that it will be. And then let's say, for example, at half a second, right here about in the middle, I can double click. There's no quick keys like in Flash, like F6, for example, but I can double click in the timeline and get my frame. Okay. And so I've got my frame there. And so now I can actually animate, and all I have to do is I'm on the second keyframe. So this is where I started, this is where I end, and I can drag this down. Okay. I'm going to drag it down right about there. Okay. And then I'm going to grab another keyframe, and I'm going to make the ball just go back up again. Okay. And then I'm going to do another keyframe, and notice that in my timeline I'm on each keyframe. You can only make changes to the ball depending on what keyframe you're on. And then I can drag it back down. And then I can do another frame, and I can drag it back up. And I'll do another keyframe, double click, and I'm going back down. And I can go off the screen. And if I rewind, now I can play that. Okay. So I've got this, I know it's a jagged bounce. Okay. Later in the, if we get there from a time standpoint, later in the webinar, one of the things I'll show you is how to make that much smoother. There are no motion paths for those of you that might be asking. Okay. So there's ways to do that from a container standpoint, which we can talk about later. But that's the basics of animation within Sencha. You add your keyframes, you drag the ball where you'd like it to go, okay, and then you can move your keyframes around on the screen by clicking and dragging. So this is how you can control your animation and where you want things to go. Okay. The other thing that's important for those of you who have not animated before is the fact that we have easing. So what tends to happen is that when the ball would bounce here, we're going to have an ease out because it's going to be faster. And then we're going to ease in because the ball would tend to slow down. And you can play with this as you get better with animation as you move along. Okay. Now, the one thing I would tell you, just like I told my Flash students for years, is that, and I'd have to work with that a bit, but what I told my Flash students for years, there's really no fast way to do really good animation. You have to pay attention, you have to really look at what you're doing, and you have to kind of go through the steps. You will get faster because you get better at it. But animation takes time, okay? Just like if you're animating in PowerPoint to get everything to adjust the way you want it to and do all the things you want it to, it takes time. Same thing with Sencha Animator from that standpoint. I have a question from Andrew I'll take. It says, what about using the export tools in Flash Pro to generate HTML5 animations? Yes, you can do that. There's Swifty. There's the tools out of Adobe now that you can do that. And you can use that to create the animations as well. So if you're a Flash animator, you can go that route. The one thing that I really like about Sencha, which I'll show you here in a minute, is the fact that I can add interactivity very, very easily. When you export animation out of Flash, unless something came out just recently, you don't get movie clips, you don't get some other things in there, and so it makes it hard. This actually gives me the ability to put in interactivity very quickly, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay. Are there any other questions about just basic animation? Just a quick review. I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm not going to do a lot of transformations on this. I just want to show you real quick. I draw my ball, double-click, keyframe, starting point, double-click my next point, wherever I want it to go, double-click again, drag it where I want it to go, double-click again, drag it where I want it to go. And really, when you get down to it, that's really all there is to animation. It's a very simple thing. Okay? And if I want to do another ball, okay, I can drag this out, create another one, and you can think about bullets, things that you do. Just make sure that anytime you're going to do anything to the ball, you must have a keyframe, and I need to double-click, to get there. And I can also, and so I can do all kinds of things with that from that standpoint. I can also change color. So if I get to the ball here, for example, and I go to my background color, I change it to red. Notice that this will actually transform and blend in as I go from one color to the next. Okay. Good question. It says, do you have to create multiple animations for different mobile platforms, iPad versus Android, etc.? It's a good question. If the browser on the mobile device supports the WebKit HTML5 CSS that Sencha supports, okay, which Android, iOS support, and others, lots and lots of others, you should be just fine. For the Windows 8 mobile devices, they've chosen, at least at the moment from when I last heard, not to support the WebKit, so there may be issues there. But if you try to play HTML5 and things in the Windows browser, as far as IE, Internet Explorer right now, things don't work. So generally, yes, for most smart devices. Any tweening in this program? It is tweening from the sense that I'm dragging where I want it to go, and it's creating all the tweens in the middle. So maybe I misunderstand the question. But yes, I am tweening. That's the space in between the keyframes. It's creating all those extra frames in the middle. So maybe I misunderstood. What does the structure output look like? Okay, so let's go back. Let's take a look at, well, let me open up another file folder, and I'm going to show you another animation, and then I'll show you the structure for that, and it'll make more sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to actually create a file I was working on earlier, which is called Writing Presentations. Okay, and basically this is a quick menu that pops up on the screen, and it creates a menu, okay, to do that. And so this is a more practical use. I animated the ball, and there might be animations you want to use, but this is a more practical case for that. And this is what we're going to use to show some things. And let me come back to the structure question in just a moment. What I want to do right now is I actually want to show you some other things that you can do with Sencha Animator. And let me find it here and show you some examples. So here's an example. And it'll be a little jagged on your screen, but you'll get the idea, I think. So as you can see, there's some nice animations there. Okay. And there's no audio playing, by the way, in my headphones at the moment. Okay. And then here's another animation. This was pretty common in Flash, but it's a page turn animation. Okay. And if you'd like to take a look at that, if you just look up Sencha Animator demos, there's several of these like this from that standpoint. And I have some others running in a course here. So for example, I've got this piston example, which is from the Sencha side as well, running. Okay. And many of you will look at this, especially if you haven't done animation before, and go, oh wow, I could never do something like that. But I want to break this down for you. We had the bouncing ball and we had the keyframes. So if you think about the multiple layers that we have, okay, this square moving up and down is just like the ball, or the rectangle moving up and down. It's just like the ball moving up and down on its layer. And then we have the piston portion here, or the arm moving up and down. Okay. Then we have a wheel rotating, which is very much like the ball. I'm just rotating something at that point. And then we have things changing color. And the rollover, when I roll over these, are just CSS manipulations, which I can show you in a bit. But it's the one thing I always tell people about animation is that the hardest thing is just learning how to build a construct. In other words, how am I going to put this animation together? Okay. But I think it's really important to note that I think animations and models are extremely important to what we do in mobile learning because it's very simple. It's very easy for the learner to understand the material. However, it may take us more time to put it together. But usually you'll reuse these models, especially animated models, over and over and over again, okay, from that standpoint. All right, so let's take a look at the course that this other project that I put together, and then I'll show you the examples. And this is not really a course, but it's content, if you will. And by the way, I'm not talking a lot about instructional design today. We can talk about mobile instructional design, using Sencha Animator. This is really about getting into Sencha Animator and getting things out of it as quickly as possible. So we can talk about, well, how would I design this to build this and those kinds of things. But that's really the instructional design. This is just a very straightforward piece from that standpoint. So what I have is this quick menu, creating presentations, select each to discover each step. Sorry, I got two eaches there, but each step of creating a presentation. And the one thing I will say about instructional design here is that I'm not telling them which one to select first. They can go to any one that they may want to. The other thing that I haven't mentioned in Sencha Animator is that I have scenes. And those of you that have done Flash, you may remember scenes, but they kind of outmoded many years ago. But in Sencha Animator, we have them again. And if you want to think about this, those of you that may use Captivate tend to jump from frame to frame, okay, or slide to slide. And scenes in Sencha are very much like Captivate in the sense that you can jump from scene to scene using button clicks and things, just like you can. And so we have a timeline for each scene at the bottom of the screen, okay? So it's a good way to think about scenes from that standpoint. If I preview this, and I'm just going to preview this in a standard browser, and it defaults to Explorer for some reason, so bear with me for a second. So here's this course this little piece that I built, and if I click message, then I can see, and then I click a back button. Did this all in Sencha, okay? And now I can have all that running on my device. So in essence, basically, I could have, a mobile interface load, and then I have this one piece, and I'm using scenes for all of my content, or a lot of my content. It doesn't have to be all of it, but some of it. And so it's just a little website that I've put together using Sencha Animator from that standpoint. Okay. So, and that's the thing I like about Sencha. It's really easy to put interactivity in because it's all based on the object. So if I close this and I look at this, now we have that project I just put up on the screen. Let me pull this down so you guys can see all the layers. So here, let's analyze this animation a bit. So we have the audience coming in first, which is the first piece coming up from the bottom. Okay. We also have the text coming in, which is the title. Notice keyframes on both of those. And then notice that we have, this is actually audience, and I'll label that so it's easier to see. So we have audience coming in, and then we have delivery coming in. Okay. So this is actually message. There we go. Okay, so I've got message coming in first, and then I've got audience coming in second, and then I've got delivery coming in third. That's these three layers. And then I've got my text, and this text piece is actually my title. And then I have instructions. Okay. For those of you that are new to animation, it's very common in a sequence to do the stair step. So basically you start one animation, then you come out and you start the next one a little bit later, so everything sequences in. So if you're going to sequence a model, it's very common. Okay. The cool thing, though, is that I have not shown you how to bring in an image yet, technically. So if I've shown you how to bring in squares and circles. If I want to do text, I just click the text, and over in the general, I would type in some text. And now I have a text object that I can animate. Okay, I'm actually going to take that out for the moment. And then images. Now I'm actually going to create a new scene real quick so I can show you about images. So here I'm going to create an image, and notice it gives me a placeholder with the mountain and the sun thing behind it. And so I've got the placeholder. Now, the one thing about web design that many of us know is the fact that images are not embedded in the file. This is an HTML structure, which I'll show you in just a second. And so images are actually linked to the file. Okay. So I have to tell it what image I want it to use. So if I click my ellipse button, it actually takes me to the folder. And the first thing that some of you are going to ask, those of you that know web design, web structure, is it's linked now, but where is it linked? Is it linked to some folder on my C drive, or is it linked into the site website or the site root? And the cool thing is that when I save this, it does save the image into the exported file structure, which means I don't have to go find it and link it again. Okay, so that's a cool thing. So I'll show you that in just a second. The other thing is it also means that you can set up a lot of animations and then just replace the image at will. So if I do a quick animation here, and I put it up here, and let's say I make it bigger. I'll just make the image a little smaller here. And I do an animation with it. Okay. Then if I wanted to change that image, all I got to do is double click it, and I can just swap out the image very quickly and re-export, and then that new image will be in place. So you can use placeholders and create files and things. So let's say, for example, just from a productivity and a workflow standpoint, let's say you have a bunch of screens and things you want to work the same way. So you build the animations with one set of images, but you want your next lesson to function in a very similar way. It's very easy to go through and replace your images from that standpoint. Good question. It says, can you edit the X, Y, and HW using the panel on the right? Yes, you can. So it's transformations, and you can modify and skew your dimensions and scale, etc., right here as well. So everything you can transform numerically if you choose to do so. Okay. So this scene, I don't need it. I wanted to just show you how to put in an image from that standpoint. For video, it's basically the same thing. I drop the video in, and then I go grab the video. Okay. And I have to tell it what video I want. Okay. Notice that it actually gives you multiple sources for video from that standpoint. You can go get your poster image, which is your thumbnail. You can go get your H.264, which is usually, for most of you, an MP4 file, and then your WebM source, depending on what video is going to play where. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on video today. It's really more about animation, but basically you can select those just like you do images. Okay. Tyra, I just had that question. What is the using Sencha over Hype? Or sorry, over Edge, and Hype is kind of the same thing. And I don't use Mac every day, and Hype is for Mac only. So I actually don't know that much about Hype. I will direct folks to Jeff Batt on my team. He's done sessions on Hype as well. But Hype is an HTML5 CSS animator for Mac. And because I don't use Mac every day, I don't know all the structures there. So good question. I appreciate that on there. Let's see. So I'm just going to select the scene. I'm just going to get rid of it. All I'm doing is hit the delete key, and I just got rid of a scene. Okay. So let me export this file as you've seen it, and then I'll show you the web structure from that standpoint. So let's see. So I'm going to export the project, and I'm going to put this in a new folder just so I don't get confused here. All right, so let's take a look at what that file structure looks like now that I've exported it. So let's see. All right, so notice that I've got an index file, and then I've got assets. The assets are going to be my images, okay? It may be videos that I linked in. There also may be, depending on what I do, it may be JavaScript, it may be other things that come in there. Let me go ahead and open that index file so you can see it, and I'm going to open it with Dreamweaver. The question is, how do I create an HTML link within a picture and image? I'll show you that in just a moment. So here is the actual code. Some of you go, oh my gosh, I have no idea what you're looking at, but I will kind of just break things down a little bit. In the header, I have all the JavaScript running, okay? Coming down, let's see, stops right about there. And then the styles, all the CSS styles that were created, are actually in the pink. So it created all the styles there. And if I keep scrolling down, and notice it keeps calling the WebKit and things, okay, and I keep scrolling down. And then when I finally get to the basic animation of things, I should see it. And by the way, it's the CSS for each scene is what I'm seeing. That's why it's so long. And then notice that here is the animation and the calls for the images and things directly in the page. So here are the images that I called, okay, for each one. And notice scene 1, scene 0, scene 6. It's renumbering them because I've deleted some as I went through, okay? But this is actually where the animation technically occurs, okay? All right, so does that answer the question on structure that somebody asked a little bit earlier? I think it does. Have you placed these animations in SoftChalk? No, I have not. But I will say that if it supports HTML5, CSS3, and the WebKit, it should work. But I have not. Okay. All right, so that's the basic structure there of the site itself. Now let's talk about interactivity, because this is the part that I really like. And Hype may have similar structures, okay, to be perfectly honest, and so may Edge. But I haven't spent as much time there. But I like how easy it is to build interactivity into these pieces, okay? And so let me go back, and I'm going to go back to the menu page, okay? And I'm just going to scroll so these are on the page. And then I make sure I'm on a keyframe. So let's, for example, pick the message keyframe, right? I'm right here. And then if I double click, I get the pink squares again. If I fix my menu here so I can see well. Now I have actions. And this is great. This makes it really, really easy to do some things. So I have click and double click. at the top and click. But the other thing I noticed, if you notice that I moved down the screen, notice I have mouse out, mouse up, touch down. Here's where we're really going to get into the mobile side, is that I have touch start, touch move, touch end, touch cancel. So it is actually, these touch pieces are actually designed for the mobile device itself. So I may have some HTML5 or a Sencha piece running in a browser, and with the mouse click, I may want to do something different than I want to do on a mobile device with a touch. Most of the time not, but I could. Okay. Now the one thing I will say that works on both sides is you don't have to set both. If I set a click or a double click, it's basically the same for both devices and browser. But it's when I get specific on the touch start, touch move, touch end that it will only work on the mobile side versus the browser side. So kind of keep that in mind. Now on the click, right now I have this set to go to scene, which is very much like the tools you've used before to jump pages. So in PowerPoint, I jump to a slide. In Captivate, I jump to a slide. In Sencha, I'm going to jump to a scene, okay? Or I can open a URL in the same window. So whoever asked the question about URLs, this is how I would do it. So I'd say open a URL, and then I would type in the URL where I want this to jump. So for example, if I type in okay, it'll jump to that site at that point. Okay. And Austin mentions that setting the click also sets the test chart, and that's true from what I know. So I can also open the URL from that standpoint, or I can go to scene, I can restart the scene, go to the next scene, go to previous scene, or I can call custom JavaScript. So why would the custom JavaScript be a good thing? So I'll throw this out to the audience, any of your developers. Okay, why would be calling a custom JavaScript on a click for a course be a cool thing? Anybody have any ideas? So you might be able to close the course. Okay. The question is that why would calling a custom JavaScript from Sencha Animator be a cool thing or a good thing in a mobile course? Interactivity, yes, but what are some of the things that we might do with a custom JavaScript? Yeah, you could launch a message, right? Remember, this is a website, so we can launch a custom message. So we could tell somebody, hey, good job, or think about this, or think about that. We could also launch a pop-up window, right, in the middle of a screen if we wanted to do that. You could do a SCORM call, okay? So, but think about this. A lot of things that we can do with JavaScript on the desktop, many of those things, and I'm not going to talk about each one, but many of those things we can do on the mobile side too. So JavaScript is actually very, very powerful. And here's the thing. We've all gotten so used to Flash on the e-learning side to be our platform, and it did so many things in the background and made it easy to do pop-ups and all this kind of stuff, that really going to mobile, we're going back to technologies that we've been using for a long, long time. HTML, JavaScript. And JavaScript, before Flash came about, was really how we built really interesting and engaging looking, functioning sites with menus and structures like that. So JavaScript is another thing to learn and get better at, because on the mobile side it's very, very helpful. Now again, more tools are coming about. You won't have to build all that JavaScript and those kinds of things, but at the core, that's what we're doing. Many of you know Google, and when you go to Google sites, it's got auto refresh and stuff like that. Well, the core of a lot of Google's tools is Ajax. Well, Ajax is really not new tools. It's just a combination of tools to create interactivity, engaging pieces that sort of function on their own. In other words, let me say it better than that. Ajax creates a lot of interactivity and a lot of client that makes browser apps look like client or software installed apps from that standpoint. And it's JavaScript, it's HTML, it's a lot of technologies that we've used in the past. And so we'll work at combining those things together, but JavaScript's very powerful on the mobile side. Can you use jQuery? Should be able to, shouldn't be any issue. Does Sencha incorporate ActionScript? No. Completely different structures. Okay. ActionScript is only for Flash Player. So that's the big thing there. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I was going to load this into a mobile course. Let's see. So can you import jQuery library somehow? So let me talk about the structure. Okay. So if I'm building, you've got your architecture. Sencha has an architecture, not Animator, but Sencha's got an architecture of its own. jQuery's got an architecture as well. So could you create animations and put it inside a jQuery structure? Yes. Could you create jQuery structure because it's a site structure and put it inside of a Sencha structure? Well, that's if you keep everything encapsulated sort of in its own pieces, right? So if I'm loading that jQuery into a frame, then it should work just fine. Now, I will say right here now, that is not my strong suit between all those different pieces. I will ask some of those questions and see what the best structures might be, but from an architecture standpoint, jQuery versus Sencha versus this and that, it's not my strongest suit from that standpoint, so I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Other questions here. So once you create an object animation, how do you import the e-learning? That's what I'm about to do, so I'll show it to you in just a second. Can you import it into PowerPoint? Unfortunately not, because PowerPoint is a different structure. PowerPoint supporting the HTML. So remember, you need a browser to look at this, either a mobile browser or a web browser. Okay, so more questions here. Can you briefly explain the scene paradigm? It's basically each scene has its own timeline. So if you look on the screen right now, I've got my menu scene, its own timeline. I've got message scene, its own timeline, and I've got audience in its own timeline. And it's really very similar to PowerPoint. If you jump from slide to slide and you do animation on the slide, really each one of those slides in PowerPoint has its own timeline as well. If you're used to using Captivate, same kind of thing from that standpoint. You jump from slide to slide, each slide has its own timeline. Let's see, just a few other questions and I'll put this into a course. Can you view and modify this JavaScript Sencha outputs within the IDE? Let's see. Just so we're talking the same language, IDE, Becky, just put that out for me. We use rapid intake to desktop and mobile. How does Sencha link the rapid intake? I'll talk about that in a second. Can you duplicate scenes to make substituting content within each slide? Yes, you can. If I click a scene and I duplicate, which is exactly what I did, and I just did scenes duplicate, then I just swapped out the images and the text. So the answer is yes to that. So I just showed you that. Does Sencha round trip with any other tools? Deanna, you'll have to be more specific there. Can you duplicate? Yes. Oh, integrated design environment. Thank you. Basically, the Sencha interface in the case. Okay. Hang on. PowerPoint. Yeah, Don brings up the point that the most standard way that everybody talks about converting animation right now is actually not converting animation. What they're actually doing is they're recording their screen with video, so they'll play the animation from PowerPoint or from Flash or whatever it may be, and with the audio and everything, and then they'll use a screen recorder to capture all of that to video, and then you'll Sencha. You could use Sencha to bring that in at that standpoint. So you could do that if you chose to do so. Let's see, integrated. So hang on, Becky, I'm going to go back to your question here. Can you view JavaScript? Well, Becky, to answer your question, this is just a site structure that gets output out of that. So if you have any kind of design structures that are writing to those pages, there shouldn't be a problem. If you open up web services or whatever it may be to write into those pages, sure. I mean, you could, on the fly, if you wanted to, you could replace images outside of Sencha completely. I think that's the question you're asking, so forgive me. All right, let me jump out of questions, for example. Lots of questions, and I'll cover some of those at the end. Let's actually show you what this looks like when it's loaded into a course. So basically, where is my structure? There we go. So what I did is I took, and you guys saw me do this earlier, I outputted or exported a Sencha file, okay, and this is the file. So here was the index, and here are the assets with my images inside, okay, and then I zipped them up into a zip file, okay. Now I can't speak for every platform out there. I'm talking from the rapid intake standpoint, but one of the things that we're actually in beta testing and we're going to release soon is the ability to do custom HTML5. So what does that look like? Well, if I go to eLearning Studio and if I add a page, I have a template for custom HTML5 structure. Okay, I have templates for text and images and audio and all those kinds of things, but custom HTML5 gives me a ton of flexibility. The cool thing about this is that when I create my page, really with rapid intake, we're fill in the blank mobile, what I always say. But there's two ways to implement custom HTML. I can use the editor, which is just an HTML editor that I can actually type directly in, and I can copy and paste code directly out of Dreamweaver right in here, okay? And I can do that. And I can also, when I go grab an image, it goes out to our media manager, and I can grab an image, and it'll insert that image and those kinds of things. So this is just an HTML editor. What we're talking about today, though, because the HTML5 out of Sencha is a package, we need to have the whole thing, okay? So it is the upload version, and here is the conversation. Notice on the screen it's got 10-inch tablet and 7-inch tablet. Here's the thing to realize about doing mobile development is that screens and aspect ratios change constantly, okay? So we gave you the ability to actually upload packages that are designed for tablets, and then the smallest will default for the mobile phone as well. And so what I do is I go out and I upload my new HTML package, which I did already, and it's this zip file. Must start with an index file so it knows where to start. And I've already got this in place, so it's right here. And then I just insert that selected package. And I do the same thing again. And notice that I may have considerations on size when it comes to different tablet pieces that I may use. Okay? And so if I preview this, so if you're not using rapid intake, then whatever mobile platform you're using, you need the ability to insert custom HTML into that package, okay? Or upload your entire HTML piece at Sencha Animator. If you're just creating your mobile courses directly in HTML, well, then this is not an issue. You just wrap it, using whatever HTML tool you do. You have your interface that you've created, and then you basically do a frame or whatever, however you'd like to do it, or you can embed it on the page and put that all into place. So you notice in this case, I've got the piston running here, and it's running at the size that it's running, okay? And I'm actually going to bring this to the phone so we can see it all. So here I'm going to load that little menu that I created, okay? And now I'm on one page in my course, and now I can actually run the content that I just built out of Sencha Animator, okay? And that's how you would get into the course. So the big picture there, let me go back to the PowerPoint for just a second. This will make more sense to you. So if we go back to this slide real quick, you're going to have HTML running your navigation, your next and back buttons, and all those kinds of things, right? And then if you want to run your Sencha, you're going to either embed your Sencha HTML on this HTML page, or you're going to load a frame, they call it an iframe, into this page that loads that Sencha website, okay? Now, again, there's going to be lots of questions. I haven't looked at the questions, but I know there's going to be tons of questions on architecture, okay? It really depends on where you start. If you build it from scratch, you'll load it one way. It just depends on how you want to do it, to be perfectly honest. You can take code that Sencha gives you and plug it into somewhere else, or you can take the whole package and load it into somewhere else. It just kind of depends on what works best in your environment, how you're creating things. So let me take a look at questions from the standpoint. Again, just go back here for just a second. So again, we are Rapid Intake has the custom HTML that we will be releasing very soon. So you don't have to worry about the interaction or the interface and all that. You just have to worry about the content. So you built your Sencha animation, and then it just plays in the site. So you just have to worry about this piece. You don't have to worry about everything else, which is cool. All right, so let me go back and let me take some questions and see what we've got here. Any considerations for integrating with IE? I'm assuming Internet Explorer. That's a tough one. That's sort of up to Internet Explorer. A lot of things we've been talking about today don't work on Internet Explorer. That's a decision that Microsoft has made, unfortunately. The only thing I can think of is that, I don't know. I have to get back to you on that. Let's see. I'm wondering whether a best bet might not be developing in Flash 3, which probably doesn't support anything that wouldn't survive a Swiffy conversion. I haven't seen you do anything that I haven't. Okay, so let me go back to that for just a second. Yes, there are other ways to create animations for HTML5. Okay, I've done it. Matter of fact, if you go out to my blog, I'm a big fan of Flash. I've taught it for years. And I'm only bringing this up for examples, so let me let that load. But yeah, I mean, if you want to convert just animations and you're really good in Flash, there's no reason you can't do that using Swiffy or other extensions for Flash. Okay, from that standpoint. So yeah, go right ahead. This Sencha is just another way of doing so. But I'll show you that article in just a second. Let's see. Does Sencha Animator make it obvious how to set up 10-inch versus 7-inch tablet? Let me show you where I did that. I didn't really go through that. If I do a new project, it's got basic sizes set up at the beginning. Okay, but let me make a comment here. These are relative sizes, and the reason I say that is because every type of tablet, every type of phone has different resolution settings. So you are going to have mixed results depending on the platform. Okay, so my recommendation is to keep it as simple as possible, straightforward as possible from that standpoint. And I talk a lot about making interactivity, engagement, not just by animation, but engagement through making the user make decisions. Okay, and then it really doesn't matter as much, how much animation you've got going on, but they're making decisions as far as what to click and where to go next, and those kind of things. The choose your own adventure standpoint. Okay, let's see. We're just about done, guys. It's 1 o'clock, but my time. But let me just see if I'll take up some of these final questions. The way Photoshop round trips Captivate direct import from PS into Captivate detects any changes in the PS file. Yes, that's a specific workflow on the Adobe side. Let's see. If developed on Sencha, will it work on the desktop PC? Yes, in browsers that support WebKit, so it will work in Chrome, it will work in Firefox, I believe, and it will work in Safari on the desktop as well. They struggles on the IE side, if I recall. Are there any issues dynamically loading Sencha animations into a single page? Dustin, honestly, I haven't done that. I tend to wrap it because I want my interface separate from my content, and always have. Even when I started doing e-learning way back with Director many, many years ago, I always wanted the parent-child structure, so I like keeping things separate. I'm sure you can do it as long as you take all the pieces with it. Okay. Does it import vector files? I don't think so, because it's looking for bitmap files, because it's I can take a look, but I think it's only looking for specific types of files, and I don't think so, because it's a website. What a website support, they support GIF, PNG, JPEG, etc. So I'll leave it at that for that one. Okay. Any final thoughts or questions? Guys, the cool thing is that I wanted to get you introduced to a new tool that you might be able to use for animation on the mobile side. And we've talked a little bit about Flash and that you can go mobile with that with some conversions. Okay, just be aware of converting complex structures from Flash. I know they're getting better, so that's good. Sencha Animator, adding interactivity, the mouse on clicks and taps and those kinds of things. So that's cool. So I really appreciate your time. I hope this has gotten you into one more tool that might be useful to you from that standpoint. And I look forward to very much releasing our custom HTML5 to the broader public for rapid intake, because that really gives us a lot of flexibility to do things. Okay. How much does Sencha, by the way, is S-E-N-C-H-A, just so when you search for it, you'll find it. I'm just reading final questions here. Oh, Becky, no worries. Becky was just concerned she was a little snippy today. Yeah, here's the thing, guys. We're all evaluating tools. Many of us are instructional designers and developers a long time, and we're sort of evaluating what tools come next as far as content goes. So should I animate in Flash, or should I animate in Edge? Should I animate in Sencha? How do I convert things and all those kinds of things? That's part of this process. I picked Sencha as one of the first tools that I really picked up, although what I was going to show you in my blog is that I go back and I've got why e-learning developers should still learn Flash, which is right here. And because Flash is still a very, very good animation tool, and it's evolved. So there's a lot of nice things here. And so a lot of these are actually conversions of animations that my students did many years ago. Okay, so now obviously this is HTML5 converted directly out of Flash. But again, I will say, similar to Sencha, that when I export this, the same structure applies in the sense that I still have a package of animation that I have to plug into my course. It's still an HTML website. It is not, or an HTML page. It is not Flash Player. Okay, so be aware of that. Sencha SEO, I'm not sure, Al, on the SEO side, to be honest with you. I haven't looked at that much. All right, any final questions, guys? We're a little bit past time. I appreciate everybody hanging out today and going through things with us. Any final thoughts? All right, so if you want to talk with me, I'd be happy to work with you if you need things. Feel free to contact me at jbickle@CalidusCloudLearning. I am available to assist, and we can talk about those services and things if you need that. Coming up, I will be at ASTD TCC up in St. Paul on the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, or 23rd and 24th. And then I will also be at DevLearn at the ARIA at the end of October. So I'd like to see you guys there, and I will get the video converted. It takes a little bit of time to get this posted because I have to convert it and do several things, but it should be up next week for you guys. And I'll put the link to the slide deck there as well. Okay, you guys have a wonderful Friday. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it so much, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.